This is the, thank goodness, the doomed and failed Senate border bill. It just happened. Again, this is related to the sanctuary city. It's also related to the very first topic about these stupid laws about legalizing drugs because they have no substance. It's all political. It's all virtue signaling. It's all signaling. It's all it is. So this is from the Heritage Foundation. This piece: the border bill is a disaster for border security. As we begin, the U.S. Senate has finally released the quote unquote border security text that three senators, Krysten Sinema, Independent, Arizona, Chris Murphy, Democrat, Oklahoma, and James Lankford, Republican, Connecticut, secretly negotiated for weeks with the Biden administration. Before I read this text, and by the way, I took a lot out of this. I really encourage you to read the entirety of the bill, or at least most of it, but I shrunk this down to a very short piece here for you. But before I read that, let me talk to you about these three dinglings: Sinema, Murphy, and Langford, and why these three were involved in these behind the scenes negotiation with the Biden administration. Sinema, a couple years ago or so, she changed her affiliation from Democrat to Independent. Now, in a practical sense, am I glad about that? Yeah, I'm glad about it. But what was the motivation for Sinema? Motivation is she lives in a border state. She's in Arizona. This woman wants to keep her job. That's fine. But why don't you keep the job by standing for exactly what you believe? Well, she's actually doing that when I think about it, because what she believes in is keeping her job. This is why she went from Democrat to Independent in that border state. I'm telling you right now, if she were in a solid blue state, she would have changed that affiliation. She is trying to keep her job. And this is why she was one of the people on this little three-person committee, because she wanted to project the belief, the idea that she was doing something to alleviate the border crisis, that she's got her nose to the grindstone there. She's working hard to enhance border security. It's crap, it's BS. She's not, especially when I read some excerpts from this bill, you'll see why. So that's her motivation. Murphy. Look, I can't say enough about Murphy because look, this guy he's a climate crisis kook. You know what? The cow farts and baking bread and your gas stove, all this crap he believes are going to go ahead and send the world into a heat crisis or climate change, whatever it is now, because they can't get their story straight because the weather keeps changing faster than their own stories change. But anyway, he's got that going on. He's anti-Second Amendment. What else? Socialized healthcare, everything you would think from the Democrats. So he's a point man for the Democrat Party, and they got to have this guy in here because he's really the epitome of the Democrat Party right now, a big time lefty. That's what his role is in there. This is actually just right on par for him. Number three, people say, well, James Lankford, Republican, Connecticut, geez, Bark, what could be wrong with that? And by the way, when you look at his record, Lankford, he actually has on paper pretty good record on a lot of topics. I asked myself, why is he involved in this? What is his purpose? Does he really believe that this border bill they put together is really going to enhance border security? No, he doesn't believe it. And here's why I believe he doesn't believe what he actually authored. And by the way, he decided not even to vote for his own bill. There's a reason for that too. Can you believe that? He decided not to even vote for his own bill. But here's what is telling you about Langford, ladies and gentlemen. He was personally tapped by Mitch McConnell, also known as Turtlehead. Mitch McConnell, who is a loathsome swamp creature, he probably epitomizes a swamp more than any elected official in Washington, D.C., because he pretends to be a conservative. He claims to be a conservative Republican, but he is so much entrenched in the personal politics of Washington, D.C., that, again, nobody could better represent the swamp than Mitch McConnell. This guy plays both sides of the aisle. He has for decades, and he will until the day he leaves in one capacity or another. So when I find out that someone was ordained by Mitch McConnell to be involved in negotiations, immediately a giant red flag goes up. That's what Lankford was doing in there because he got asked by Mitch McConnell. Anyway, these three secretly negotiated with the Biden administration. The Emergency National Security Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024 includes more than $20.2 billion for border funding and hundreds of pages of border and immigration reforms. We don't need all those pages, folks. We don't need the $20 billion. We don't. The key takeaway is that neither the funding nor the statutory reforms would truly secure the border, and border security is the only measure that Congress should use. 100% correct. With more than $7 billion for the Departments of Homeland Security, State, Justice, and Health and Human Services, the Biden administration would again fund, guess what? Sanctuary jurisdictions and non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that have been facilitating mass illegal immigration using federal grants provided by these departments. Remember, I told you this last topic I'm going to touch on here is separate from the Denver sanctuary city, but closely related. This is important for everyone listening to absorb. Part of this bill would be to continue to fund or further fund, in other words, increase funding for sanctuary cities, making it able for Mayor Johnson and people like him across this country now to continue to house and pay for the mass movement of people coming across our southern border. This is an insidious, nasty, deceptive little bill that the Biden administration and these three dinglings I just talked about were involved in. And it's also involved to make the Republicans look bad because they knew the bill would fail. And now they want to say, we had a bill here and the Republicans wouldn't sign off on it. They don't want border security. These deceptive, dishonest people are absolutely what's wrong with this country. Sanctuary mayors and governors have decried the volume and cost of illegal aliens amassed in their jurisdictions, yet they do not terminate their sanctuary policies. Instead, they demand more federal taxpayer money to pay for sheltering, transporting, and providing social services to the ever increasing number of illegal aliens. This bill would deliver for those mayors and governors. Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? This bill would actually send them the money they're begging for. Both the Biden administration and the sanctuary officials work with a network of secretive NGOs and non-governmental organizations that build and staff the considerable infrastructure that facilitates the mass illegal immigration from as far south as South America to and throughout the United States. Multiple videos have shown that NGO staff at shelters, hotels, and airports refuse to answer questions about the illegal aliens they guard and grow physically abusive when filmed. Congress should be investigating and shutting down this sanctuary NGO machinery, not giving it more money to continue operating. What three senators negotiated with the architects of the America's border crisis would convert the Biden administration's destructive policies and violations of immigration law into statute. These measures would not only continue the border crisis, but would also make it more difficult for future enforcement-minded presidents to fix. I hope that's clear. This is to codify this shambles of a so-called immigration policy, to codify, to put it into law, to slow down any reversal of this mass out of control, yes, invasion level of immigration coming across the border. It's exactly what they decided to do. In other words, if by any chance the Republicans would have voted to support this, the Biden administration was hoping to win in that aspect. Republicans say no, they're hoping to win in a political aspect, saying we tried, the Republicans shut us down. The other thing is that in this bill, I took all this out here to make this as short as possible, that was tied to this was funding for the Ukrainian war and for Israel military funding to fight Hamas. It was tied to this bill. So it's all or nothing. This was also trying to embarrass the Republicans, saying, oh, they voted not to fund Ukraine. By the way, I hope they don't fund Ukraine. That's my personal view, and not fund Israel. They're not funding any of them. Another way they wanted to try to embarrass the Republicans. Let me tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, it's not going to work. It is not going to work. Anybody with two brain cells can see right through this scam, this sham. That's exactly what this is. The Senate bill, let me give a couple of bullet points in the Senate bill. The Senate bill accepts and codifies crisis levels of daily illegal immigration. If passed into law, the bill would create a 3-year, quote unquote, border emergency authority to allow agents to expel illegal aliens back across the border during extraordinary migration circumstances. But the numerous exceptions and limitations swallow that authority whole. The Secretary of Homeland Security has the discretion to activate the authority after the U.S. Customs and Border Protection encounters an average of 4,000 illegal aliens daily for 7 consecutive days. Do you understand what that text says? That they can't send illegal aliens back. They can't stop them until they have 4,000 encounters a day for seven consecutive days. In other words, we have 3,800 a day. They just keep coming, just like right now. They put threshold. Why allow 1 encounter? Why allow 5? Why allow any encounters? It should be an absolute thing that the border is shut down to anybody trying to get through illegally. Plain and simple. The Secretary of Homeland Security, activation of the emergency authority becomes mandatory after the CBP encounters a 5,000 illegal alien daily average for 7 consecutive days, or 8,500 in 1 day. Not counted in those numbers are the unaccompanied children, parolees, those who claim a fear of prosecution, have already been in the U.S. for 14 days or already traveled beyond 100 miles from the southwest border. The Secretary would not be able to activate the authority for more than 270 days, 225 days, and 180 days in calendar years 1, 2, and 3, respectively. In other words, even with all these people still coming across with no authority to stop them, at best, this is only good for 270 days a year, the authority at all to stop them, even these thresholds. And at worst, only half a year in the 3rd year. Ask yourself, why? Why do they have any of these thresholds? Why shouldn't every single day, why should it not be up to the United States to vet every single person and decide whether they can come into the United States or not? Why? I'll tell you why. Because the Biden administration wants to continue this mass immigration at all costs. That's why. The bill then adds cumbersome and confusing calendar calculation requirements that further limit the Secretary's use of the emergency authority. Finally, both the Secretary and the President could suspend the authority. Did you hear that? They can suspend it altogether. Based on what? I don't know. Who cares? They shouldn't be able to suspend it at all. They shouldn't have any of these thresholds here to begin with. This should not be an issue. Continuing to allow these crisis level numbers of illegal alien encounters means that border agents would remain overwhelmed and more illegal crossers would evade the agents, turning into gotaways, and bad actors would slip through limited and rushed vetting. This bill continues the catch and release and guts the mandatory detention statute. Current law mandates detention from any alien who illegally enters the U.S. while pursuing asylum protection. The Senate bill redefines detention to non-custodial detention and applies the supervised release by another name only to adults. If passed into law, families and children would be released without supervision. On and on. Finally, President Biden could secure the border with current authority. He does not want to. Just like I said, President Joe Biden opened the border and created the country's crisis using only executive, non-congressional authority. He can end the chaos with the same executive authority. He does not need congressional authority. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, think back 3 years ago. One of the very first things, not only was it one of the very first things he did through executive order, he campaigned on it. He campaigned with the mantra, I will stop the wall. Not one more foot of wall will be built.
Trump campaigned on build that wall. Are you willing to tear that wall down?
No, there will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration, number one. Number two, what I'm going to focus on, the fact is that somebody in this group written a lot about the border. I'm going to make sure that we have border protection, but it's going to be based on making sure that we use high-tech capacity to deal with it. And at the ports of entry, that's where all the bad stuff is.
In the region are stronger than they've ever been. But this progress is still fragile, and you all know it. You know it better than I, many of you. And it requires a sustained commitment by all the parties, particularly the United States. We can't wall ourselves off from the problems that are not bound by borders.
Not one more foot of wall will be built when I become president. And when he became president, through executive order, not through congressional activity, not through introducing a bill, not through negotiations, with literally one fell swoop of the pen, he ended the border wall construction. And now he has the gall and his administration to tell us that he can't reverse his own executive order. They think that we are as dumb as they are. That's what they think. They think that we are as gullible as they are. He does not need any authority that he has not already utilized. By the way, go back in time a little bit. Watch, I forget what show it is. We can find it. Remember last fall, a few months ago, this man said that because of the law now, he has to start building the wall with funds that were allocated just for, I told you then, he says he's going to build a wall with these funds that he's forced to legally. He has to use them, blah, blah, blah. I told you then he was going to build 1 inch of wall, not 1 inch. You guys go look for yourself. Has he built 1 inch of wall? No. Since then, he hasn't. He just projected that. Knowing what the polls show, knowing what the American sentiment is right now, that immigration is now the number one issue, and not just on one side of the aisle, ladies and gentlemen, this is the problem. And he and his administration know it. So a few months ago, he pretends to start, okay, we're going to do this and blah, 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 blah. Well, now what is he doing? Now he's saying that he can't take any action without Congress's approval, without a law being passed. We know that is a lie. We know it is a complete, utter, shameless lie. That would be bad enough. But what is this man doing? What is he doing? He is blaming the previous president. And by the way, whether you love Trump or hate Trump is not the point of today's show. It's not even the point about this bill. The point is how duplicitous Joe Biden and his administration are. That's the point. And others like him around this country. We know for a fact that if he wanted to build the wall, he could literally start building today. But beyond that, what's worse is this. He blames the previous president for the problems that have arisen in the last 3 years since he was sworn in as commander-in-chief. As a matter of fact, Anthony, play that video right now of President Biden not taking responsibility for his own actions.
The result of all this hard work is a bipartisan agreement that represents the most fair, humane reforms in our immigration system in a long time, and the toughest set of reforms to secure the border ever. Now, all indications are this bill won't even move forward to the Senate floor. Why? A simple reason. Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump thinks it's bad for him politically. Therefore, he doesn't, even though it helps the country, he's not for it. He'd rather weaponize this issue than actually solve it. So for the last 24 hours, he's done nothing, I'm told, but reach out to Republicans in the House and the Senate and threaten them and try to intimidate them to vote against this proposal. And looks like they're caving. Frankly, they owe it to the American people to show some spine and do what they know to be right. So I want to tell the American people what's in this bill and why everyone, from the Wall Street Journal to the Border Patrol to the Chamber of Commerce, the United States Chamber of Commerce, support this bill. Because it's going to make the country safer, make the border more secure, treat people more humanely and fairly, and make legal immigration more efficient and consistent with the values of our nation and our international treaty obligations.
Now that right there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that is, if not the ultimate, that's a really damn good example of lack of leadership and no shame whatsoever. You've been in office for 3 years and you have the gall to tell the American people that the 6 or 8 million people that you have let come in this country since you've been president is the previous president's fault. Again, I don't even care what your political affiliation are. You guys know where I stand. It doesn't matter. But the idea that this man would blame the previous president for everything that's happened under his administration when he actually stopped the measures the previous president had taken to stop the flow of immigration. I believe it was President Trump's last year. I believe it was, we had 400,000 encounters at the southern border in his last year. I think last month we had over 300,000, but he blames Donald Trump. This is our commander in chief. This is our leader. I'll finish up with this, ladies and gentlemen. The only test for funding and legislation, would it truly secure the border? That's the question. That's the only measuring tool we have. Would it secure the border? When illegal aliens come to the U.S., they want to enter, remain, and work here. And that is the best case scenario. The border is just as open to terrorists, the Chinese, Russians, and any number of people who do not want to merely work here. Securing the border requires preventing those 3 things. The bill negotiated by 3 senators and President Biden funds and facilitates more mass illegal immigration. It is a disaster for border security, and it is an attempt to politically cripple one party and one candidate, and it will not work. Ladies and gentlemen, these are 3 examples of a party who has completely lost its mooring from principles, completely lost its moorings from objectivity and the rule of law. We as Americans have to embrace the fact that one party is working harder, not perfect, but working harder to ensure the rule of law than another party. Period. The numbers bear it out without question. And I implore you to support those people at a local, county, state, and federal level who actually want to ensure the rule of law. That's all I can ask of you. I hope you do it. God bless you. We'll see you next time. I'm the Chief at Your Leo Nation. Take care.